What is going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with your core plays for this week's Arnold Palmer Invitational, the API for short. Gonna break down the top end of the Draftkings pricing board and go over my top 4 GPP plays that I'll be using in some large field contests to try and get some leverage to the field and hopefully get a takedown. Last week, our core placement ended up going 3 for 4 through the cut, which is about par, I'd say. Cam Davis being the one guy who missed the cut on the number, so that was a little bit unfortunate. Did lip out on his 36th hole, so had a chance to make it. Was a little bit heartbreaking to see in person, but still a pretty solid week. Guys like Billy Ho showed out. Aaron Wise, though he made the cut on the number, ended up being one of the top scorers there in the lower 9K range, and even JT Poston, after the sluggish, pretty horrible start there on a Thursday, rebounded quite nicely throughout the weekend. So while our core plays weren't really the bangers I was looking for, they, kind of got us by, got the job done. This week, with a top-end elevated field, hoping to bring home some winning upside, right? When we have all the top 10, all the top 20 players in the world, it's going to be a little bit difficult to make some of these decisions up here. But on a week with all of this talent, I mean, any of these players could win, right? So whether we're in the 10K range with one of the big three, that higher 9K, or even there in the lower 8K range, definitely a few diamonds in the rough that could easily be hoisting the trophy by week's end. So a lot to talk about. A lot to get into here at the golf course. Let's go ahead and get this thing started. Alrighty guys, as we typically do with these videos, let's start with a look at our key stats, the kind of metrics I'm using to identify my top plays. And at the top, we've got shots gained approach. Shouldn't be surprising to anybody, usually our number one key stat. But it's worth noting that those mid-iron ranges, some of those longer irons, are slightly more emphasized around Bay Hill than most tracks. So that 175 to 200, any of those 200 plus yard ranges, gonna have slightly more weighting here for this week than, they would last week there at a Honda Classic. That was about 400 yards shorter. Around the green, this is what I would classify a short game course. The ball striking isn't all that much a test. If you take a look at the fairway percentages, the green and regulation percentages, both are just slightly lower than your tour average. The missed fairway penalty is relatively large too. So it's a little bit more so about when you actually miss the greens, when you get out of position at Bay Hill, the consequences of doing so, which with your driving accuracy, there's a little, some water that can get into play. So that's where that penalty comes in. But in and around the greens, you're faced with some of the more difficult shots on tour. I'm talking, sloped around the green shots with 12, 13s on the stimp meter for the greens here. They're listed at 12s right now, but they're going to get faster as the week goes on. I'll definitely keep an eye on that when I'm out on the course on Wednesday. I'll be there for the Pro-Am. And just there's rough around it. There's a few spots that are shaved down where you're going to have that fairway grass to try and get up and down from. You essentially have to have your complete around the green play to get it done. You've seen guys like Victor Hovland have spike weeks around here with the around the green, and that's when he nearly won, right? Last year finished tied for second, and he was just a slight gainer around the green, which for him is like him playing to his ceiling around the green. So, even for somebody that's going to struggle in that category, they're going to have to try and figure it out and at least get it to a neutral to succeed, because of the top 20 finishers last year, only 2 players didn't gain around the green. One of them finished in the top 10, and then one of them was, believe it or not, John Rahm, who finished tied for 17th, which is also a little bit surprising, right? Even Victor Hovland, like I said, gained around the green. Looking at shots gained putting, I'm looking at Bermuda grass numbers, also putting on fast Bermuda greens. Looking at bogey avoidance, driving accuracy, I talked about some of the water there. Par 3 scoring over 200 yards, extremely long and difficult par 3s at Bay Hill. Driving distance, we're not ignoring it, but just perhaps maybe a little bit less important this week than most. Shots gained at the Florida Swing, and then a few of our comp courses, which I'm looking at Sawgrass and Scottsdale, similar tests around the green. PGA National, another Florida track where wind is a huge part of the equation. And then I'm looking at Copperhead, which is another Florida track. Not the best comp, so I'm not weighing it all that much. And same thing with Muirfield Village. In the ball striking test, lots of long irons. So you're looking at a similar kind of approach distribution, but unfortunately completely different from the agronomical perspective, right? All the grass types are different over there in Ohio as opposed to down here in South Florida. So there's a few that are better than the others. I'd say that Sawgrass, probably the best I mean, even Scottsdale, right, has differences when it comes to the agronomy. So if you're going to look at any course the most, probably TPC Sawgrass. But even, and I was thinking about this too, you could use East Lake Golf Club, another ball striking test with lots of long irons. That's on Bermuda. But unfortunately, this course is relatively flat. And then over there, in East Lake, Georgia, tons of hills and undulations. So there's not any perfect comps that you can use around the PGA Tour, but a few of those you might want to consider for your analysis. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into our top picks. And when I was thinking about East Lake, Rory McIlroy just floods to your mind, right? Has an insane track record there, and I know it's a limited field event, but still just multiple time champion, always finishing in the top 3, it seems, around that track. And it may be the Bermuda, right? He's from down here in South Florida now, right? Plays, I don't know, every time that he's not out there in competition, so solid 6 to 9 months of the year, is playing down here in Bears Club in South Florida, or one of the adjacent country clubs. And it's no surprise that a lot of his top-end finishes over the last few years, whether it's even a Zozo Championship a few years ago over there in Las Vegas, actually it might have been it was the CJ Cup that he ended up winning over there, was another course that was Bermuda grass. So when you look at some of these wins, I mean, even internationally on the DP World Tour, it's a similar style track to what we get here, which emphasizes that driving, right? Whether it's accuracy or distance, he has both, which for some of the par 5s is going to be especially useful, but he's one of the best long iron players of all time, right? Let alone in this field. He has that high ball flight, can hit a 6-iron, skyscraper high up there and get it to stop on pretty much any green. And with how firm and fast this course gets, that is an unbelievably great thing to be able to do. It's extremely useful around here. So when you take a look at the event history, it should be no surprise that he's been elite, right? Top 13 finish the last 5 years. In fact, last year, T13 was the worst that we've gotten from him in seemingly forever here, right? Top 10 there, top 5, T for 6, and then 1 back there in 2018. So in terms of track record, right? I mean, Scotty Scheffler's got a pretty good one so far. No one else can match that, right? You go the whole way down to Sungjae Im, who we're actually going to talk about here in a second, right? You see a couple T3 finishes. Rory McIlroy is essentially the king of Bay Hill. And I know last year, right, might have been a little bit disappointing. A lot of people played him last year. Rose his ownership. He was, maybe the most chalky player in the slate last year, if memory serves me correctly. But this time around, because Jon Rahm is on this heater, Scotty Scheffler's your returning champion, right, is in form of himself right now. I think that he's going to be slightly lower owned than he should be, and he still might be maybe your second highest owned player up here, right? Maybe behind a Jon Rahm. But I think that's well warranted given how well he's playing. Last time out, just could not buy a putt for his life, was gaining a bunch off the tee like we know he's capable of, and then gaining a ton with the irons, just hitting 15-footer after 20-footer out there with the irons. It just couldn't sink any of the putts. I mean, I know for the first 3 rounds, he hadn't made a birdie putt over 10 feet, and then I believe on Sunday he was able to break that streak, but still only mustered up 2 birdies at a golf course that set up beautifully for him. So, Rory McIlroy, the putter has to turn around, but now we get him to come out east. Like I said, he lives down in South Florida now, right? He's very used to the conditions he's going to be facing here. He's used to Bermuda. A lot of those top-end finishes have come on Bermuda. So perhaps now that he's getting away from that POA, which tends to trick a lot of players out there and toward not just Rory McIlroy, he can get back to the kind of skill set, the kind of finishes that we saw there towards the end of last year. Another top end finish, right? Think of East Lake, right? Last time he went out there, stormed the field, came back on Scotty Scheffler. That was another Bermuda track and one of those comp courses that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Next up, we've got Will Zalatoris. So I don't think I had to tell you to play Rory, right? Maybe that just gives you a little bit of backing, but I can tell you that Will Zalatoris, last time out, right, he was a core play for us, was unbelievable. He gained across all 4 stat categories, gained it around the green even. I mean, we don't usually see that from Will Zalatoris, but the putter was also a positive. And we were kind of counting on the putter, right? We saw that at the Century Tournament of Champions. He went out there, was able to gain in that field, which was one of the most elite fields in all of golf, and then backed it up. But not only that, he brought the ball striking along, right? What we're used to seeing from Willie Z, but kind of eluded him there at the Century Tournament of Champions. Didn't hit the ball the best, but now that that's back, fire me up some Billy Z. It's a difficult track where he tends to do by far his best work. He's even played well here over the years. In fact, played here 2 years ago when he was just getting out here on tour and finished in the top 10. That was before going out there, nearly winning the Masters a few weeks later. And last year, maybe not the best finish, but still made the cut, right? So he has a couple, trips around here, some experience around this difficult, brutally difficult track from year to year and hit the ball beautifully. Now, the recent form metrics are a little bit, they're from a long time ago, right? He hasn't played that much ever since having the injury. So some of these stats are even being pulled from last year. But like I said, last week, every category was a positive. And in fact, the ball striking numbers were some of the best in the field. I have no concerns about him here, right? Could he have a letdown week? For sure, right? That's golf. But all signs as of right now look that, at least are showing us that Willie Z is past the injury and he's getting back to that beautiful skill set that we knew of before, where he's just going to gain tons of strokes from tee to green. But if he found that putter, and I told you guys, I thought this was a possibility. This was one of the reasons I wanted to play him there at the Waste Management, was because he's had so much time to work on the putting. You'd have to think that it's gone a little bit better. And right, he showed us that at the Tournament of Champions. So I said, this is a legitimate possibility that we're looking at just a better putter now that he's had the time to work on it. And if the ball striking is still going to be there, like it looked like it last time out, then we're looking at potentially one of the best players in the world, because he was already one of the best ball strikers in the world, if not top 2, top 3 in the world in that category. And if you're looking at somebody that can legitimately get good at putting, and now I know from 2-3 feet, right, he's always going to look like an absolute train wreck, right? Cover your eyes if you don't want to get yips by just straight up like osmosis, right, by watching him out there. But he makes so many of those 10 to 15 footers that it makes up for that, right? And if he continues to do so, then watch out. This guy is just going to win in bunches. So the recent form, like I said, it's kind of hard to look into it, but what we've seen over the last 2 events, I think is extremely promising. And if he can build on that kind of momentum here, I think you're looking at not just somebody who's going to post top 5 after top 5, but could go on a Scotty Scheffler kind of run, because, kind of like Scotty, when he unlocked the putter, and it happened this time of year last year, he went on that winning streak, right? Will Zalatoris, arguably just as good, if not better, from tee to green. So if he's able to figure out that same sort of thing, like I said, just could be on a ridiculous run. And again, I'm not trying to call that right now. I'm just saying it's in the cards. It's well within his range of outcomes. And lastly, our last 2 picks, I'll remind you guys, if you want access to all of my plays up top, not just the guys that I'm covering here on the video, everything that is blacked out here on the spreadsheets, make sure to check out the Patreon. There's a link down below. Gets you access to all of that and all of the content I'm throwing up there throughout the week, right? Whether it's my Discord channel where I'm posting a lot of the on-course insight that I'm able to pick up, especially as I'm at these courses in person, my prop analysis, all that sort of fun stuff. That's where you'll find that. But for these last 2 picks, right, getting right back into it, we've got Sungjae Im at $8,900 to kick him off. And Sungjae last week was mega chalk, right? I faded him, was extremely vocal about that. In fact, did a whole video on why you shouldn't play Sungjae Im last week. But now that he's burned everybody, I think it's the time to buy back in. He still made the cut, was coming in on an absolute heater at that event, and loves the golf course. So if we take a look at the event history, he's once again a player that's elite there. I told you we'd get to him a little bit later. 2 top 3 finishes, a couple top 21 finishes the last 2 times out. You take a look at the shots gained even from last week, was fine, right? He pretty much gained across the board. He had a few bad rounds with the iron play, right? I believe rounds 2 and 4, he was a little bit sluggish there, and a few bad rounds with the putter. Just couldn't marry it up, right? Outside of round 1 where he went out there, lit up the golf course, it was just one thing going wrong round after round. It wasn't like his whole game was in shambles. And despite that, right, what'd he end up finishing, right? I think people were just giving him so much flack for it, but like he made the cut, finished in 42nd, right? Must we forget, top 6, right? Top 5 finish there the time before that, just consistent finish after finish. The guy makes essentially every single cut. What are we doing here? And it's a little bit early to speculate on ownership, kind of the industry sentiment. I'm legitimately thinking people are going to fade him just out of spite. I mean, you see this same trend year after year, right? Us PGA DFS players that have been doing this for a while just kind of know how the public reacts, right, to one of these extremely prominent, or at least like out there, like very highly exposed missed cuts, right? Guys that are going to be like 40% owned that miss the cut sting a little bit more than guys that are going to miss the cut at like 5% ownership. You kind of expect that. So Sungjae quietly posting solid shots gained metrics, right? From tee to green, a significant gainer in all 3 categories. Even the putter's been a slight positive, though he could be a little bit better. He's getting back to Bermuda, right? Kind of like a Rory McIlroy. A lot of his top end finishes, his wins come on Bermuda grass. So we're seeing him, finish top 10, top 5 in some of those West Coast events where the, grass types aren't really that favorable for him. But now that we're getting that to come back to earth, he's still posting that tee to green play. Like he's just got tons of upside, and hopefully enough people feel burned by that performance last week where we can get him at respectable ownership. So straightforward play, where he's a fade last week, it was just all ownership based, but now I think it's a time we can buy back in. And lastly, we've got ourselves Hideki Matsuyama, who I was tempted to take Terrell Hatton, but I think everyone's going to take Terrell Hatton. He's got ridiculous course history. He's got to win a couple top 3 finishes on top of that. So I think he's an excellent play, but I do think he's going to be ridiculously chalky. But Hideki has got some decent event history of his own. So you take a look at this here. He's made the cut the last 5 starts. Now, he hasn't posted anything better than a top 18 during that stretch, but into the past, right, you look the last 5 to 10 years, he has a few top 10 finishes, I believe a 7th place finish highlighted in there. So he's shown some top end upside, but from the skill set perspective, he's got what I'm looking for, right? Off the tee, maybe not the best, right? But he's starting to come into form there, was leading strokes, heavily hemorrhaging strokes. We were just a few weeks ago when we checked out this last 36 rounds, but gaining in all the other 3 categories, which with the putter, I think it's safe to say at this point, it's been like a year now that Hideki Matsuyama is gaining on the greens. He's just a better putter. He's figured it out. It was always his weakness. And I think because he spent so much time trying to figure out that putter, that maybe he neglected the irons a little bit, or in the off the tee play, right? And you can see of late, the irons have been just fine, but that off the tee play, right, a slight negative, that's not the Hideki that we're used to. We know that he's capable of going out there, being at least a semi-elite player in that category. And if we ever get that week, right, married up with this putter that has been around for a while, right, he's just got to get the ball striking to come around, which, like I said, it's just so surprising considering his track record in those categories. You're looking at a win because he's got that upside. You saw him last year, this time of year, like Sony Open, ended up going out there and winning, won the Masters here in just a few weeks, right? He can easily get back to that because he's putting week in and week out like he did at those events. Like just the ball striking regular version of Hideki Matsuyama, which is the part that you would think would come back the soonest, right, is what we're waiting on. So the recent form kind of reflects that. He's been a little bit volatile, right? Missed cut, top 29th, okay, but top 10 finish. You love to see those kind of starts. We just need him to put it together for 4 rounds, right? Go out there, shoot the 65, and the next day don't go out there, shoot 74, like he did at the Farmers, I believe. Yeah, the Farmers where he finished T9th here, this could have easily been a top 5 or even a win at that event if he didn't post a 74 or 75 out there a few rounds. Just, he's got to clean it up a little bit. So I'm hoping that, maybe we get the vintage Hideki this week, right, that we're used to seeing over the last 5, 10, 15 years at this point. And perhaps you're looking at a low-owned play here in the 8K range that could bring you some winning upside. Alrighty, fellas, that is all I've got for this week's core plays. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead, comment down below who you've got winning this week, and go ahead, hit that like button if you found this video helpful, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content in the future. We'll have our value plays dropping on a little bit later this evening. We'll also have some fades and sleepers, our prop video, our weekly live stream there at Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. You won't want to miss any of it, especially that live stream, because I'm going to be at the golf course, like I said, Wednesday. So going to be doing some scouting, taking a look at how fast the greens are, firmness, length of that rough, right? Changes from year to year sometimes. Go ahead and bring all of you guys the goods. So looking forward to it. Like I said, hit that like button if you haven't already. And best of luck with all of your lineups this week. Hopefully we can get a takedown here soon. Hopefully get, maybe the Shane Lowry, the Chris Kirk, and the core plays this time around. And lead to some higher ROI in those GPPs. But like I said, I appreciate all your support here. You guys consuming the content. Best of luck with those lineups and outright bets. And let's get this cash.